Not so long ago, in previous episodes, we told numerous stories of people who survived at sea. They were Salvador Alvarenga, Stephen Callahan, and Tammy Oldham Ashcraft. What makes people volunteer to go to sea? Probably the same question should be asked to climbers. Why do they go to the mountains? Of course, we will not answer on it. Very early morning of October 28, 2005, in the town of San Blas, on the central Pacific coast of Mexico, 5 men boarded a small boat for catching many white-tip reef sharks. This boat is the most popular in the Latin America countries. It names Panga. The shark fishing Panga was several feet longer than most local boats, had a draft a few feet deeper, and was outfitted with twin 200 horsepower motors. The day started out looking promising. Hurricane season was waning, there were few clouds, and the surface of the broad bay of Matanchen was calm. 3 of the men were practiced commercial fishermen who'd been hired by the boat's captain to catch sharks near the Islas Marias, an archipelago 60 miles offshore. Assuming all went well, they'd be at sea for 2, maybe 3 days. However, serious turns in weather conditions changed their plans. Then something got wrong. First, expensive fishing tackle came off, and after that precious fuel was spent on its search.
We knew where we were, approximately. The Islas Marias remained visible on the horizon, but we had no maps and no global positioning device to impart an overview of what waters we had canvassed. Nor was there a radio or a cell phone on board, or a life jacket or an oar.
They began to drink seawater as soon as they realized their fresh water supply had run out. Ingesting seawater had given everyone headaches and cramps. It had to do something, and one of them at the same day drank his own urine. The others refused to do likewise, until, after dark, they all privately did. They had no other choice. Then they sliced off the tops of 4 plastic gasoline containers, rinsed them with seawater, situated each so that it would catch rainwater trickling off the bow, and filled them, plus 2 buckets.
I decided that we weren't going to die. From that moment, we had 200 liters of water. We drank a lot because it rained a lot, and we never ran out because, the whole trip, it rained. I do think that God was with us, and we were surviving.
In 1955, Gabriel Garcia Marquez published a series of newspaper articles depicting the ordeal of Luis Alejandro Velasco, an enlisted man in the Colombian Navy, who in February of that year fell overboard in the Caribbean Sea and survived for 10 days on a life raft, without food or water. They had consumed no food, only water for 13 days. Suddenly, a sea turtle weighing about 30 pounds showed up, swimming just off the bow. One fisherman jumped on its back and gripped its shell, which he'd learned in his teens. The turtle suddenly dove deep, and he went along for the ride, wrestling until he had turned it toward the surface. 2 other colleagues helped him hoist the turtle into the panga. They severed a flipper, he sucked its blood and passed it around. Another fisherman took the knife, cut off the head, and drained a dense stream of blood into a bucket for drinking. After he had removed the meat from the shell, his friend rinsed it, and another filleted it.
I remember we said, how are we going to eat that meat? It's not like a normal meal. All you can see is the meat. Pure red. I was thinking, how is it possible that I'm going to eat that? In November, we ate only 2 times. I'd never been hungry like that, with a desperateness that can't be expressed. I don't know how to explain that this is something that one feels. It's desperateness, hunger, thirst, cold.
Their other meal presented itself a few days later, when a white seabird, most likely a tern, which can fly for long distances over the ocean, alighted on a corner of the boat. One of them slowly removed his shirt, crept toward the rear, netted the bird, grabbed its feet, and dashed it against the inside of the boat. He decapitated it, drank some blood, offered it to his companions, then plucked and quartered it. Also, there was schools of small fish often surrounded the boat, attracted by the barnacles that studded its hull. The flesh inside a barnacle shell was potential bait, but most of the hooks and handlines had either been lost or damaged. With the cowlings removed, the men scrutinized the innards of the outboard engines. The carburetors had thin rods that could be sharpened and bent into hooks. There were screws with wires wrapped around the threads, and those wires could also become hooks. Each motor had 6 insulated cables about 3 feet long which, spliced together, made lines. A hook baited with a barnacle could catch a small fish, and that fish, cut up, could become bait for bigger fish. With this approach, they caught dogfish, sharks, sawfish, and dorado. Though the men didn't realize it, this diet probably protected them from developing scurvy. Uncooked seafood has a small amount of vitamin C. Their survival continued from day to day, until at one night, one of their crew died. The likely causes were poisoning and dehydration. On the coldest nights, they all slept in the bow side by side, in the fetal position, an intimate arrangement that would have made them self-conscious on land. It was crowded, but they succeeded in staying warm. Then it became less crowded again. One of them didn't wake up.
He died at my side, asleep. We all lay down, and when the sun rose he had already died. That's the prettiest death, I think. To go to bed and die in your dream.
Soon after, one fisherman proposed raising a sail. Though the tarpaulin had disappeared with the rest of the floating anchor, they had blankets from which they could make a sail. By dismantling one of the benches, they could construct a pair of masts. Finally, on the morning of August 9th, the fishermen awoke to the sound of a motor. One of the crew stood up first and saw a much larger vessel, 100 yards away, with lettering on its bow that said Cruise 102. It had dispatched a motor launch carrying 2 men, who were gesturing and speaking a language that certainly wasn't Spanish. The men in the launch helped them aboard and then, towing the panga, delivered them to the bigger boat, a tuna trawler with a Taiwanese crew which, 2 weeks earlier, had left its home port in Majuro, the capital of the Marshall Islands, in the western Pacific. When the panga and the trawler converged, they were 600 miles from Majuro, 2,700 miles northeast of Australia, and 5,000 miles from San Blas. More than 9 months had passed since they had last seen the beach. In the course of their incredible survival, they weathered fierce fall storms and prevented dehydration by drinking the rain. For entertainment, they sang ballads, danced as best they could on the small boat, pretended to play guitar, and read aloud from the Bible. Their most perilous times came in December and January, when several large storms hit and they were unable to fish and in legitimate fear of sinking. Their longest stretch without food was 13 days. Upon their rescue, their hometowns and family greeted them as folk heroes, and their religious leaders hailed this story as proof of the power of faith.